Hey there, welcome to Charting Toward Intimacy, where we're expanding the natural family planning conversation. I'm your host, Ellen Holloway. All right, we are welcoming Annie and Sarah to the podcast today. I'm so excited to have them. Annie and Sarah have an awesome podcast called Laughs and Littles, just so fun to listen to, especially if you are like right in that toddler zone of life. Like, this is the podcast to listen to because it is just, it cracks me up all the time. And I feel like I get great advice from you guys. So I'm so excited to welcome you guys to my podcast.
We are stoked to be here.
Yeah. Awesome. And so today we are going to be talking about discerning, essentially, like spacing births, baby spacing, and how you have that conversation, and kind of talking about their individual stories in spacing births and things like that. So, but before we jump into that, could you guys just tell us a little bit about yourselves?
Yeah. So between the two of us, Annie and I have 7 kids ranging from 2 months old to almost 6 years old. So we have a lot of little kids in the house. And yeah, we co-host a podcast called Laughs and Littles, where we just chat about our friendship and like living out our Catholic faith as converts, motherhood, fertility. And our most recent episode was me sharing my entire home birth story. So
Which
I just put it all out there. I listened to it and I loved it. I'm probably never going to do a home birth, but I was like, this is amazing.
I felt the same way. And we are just like you, both from California, but we met while our husbands were studying theology at Notre Dame. And we became close friends over time, just like a very natural, nice progression. But then into COVID, our families decided to like shelter in place together. So we only saw each other for a while. And that was a really cool experience of community and like really relying on each other. But now they moved because Sarah's husband finished here and is getting his PhD in DC. But when we found out that they might be moving, Sarah pitched the idea to me of doing a podcast to like stay in touch and just like give people a seat in the room to show what, exactly what you're doing, like an honest conversation, brainstorming ways, for us to like fix sleep or a schedule issue and just encourage each other in our marriages. And it's so fun. We both love podcasts. And I really want your podcast to just like reach the whole world. I think it's very important.
Oh my gosh. I don't know if that's what I want. That's a lot of pressure.
No, I understand.
Oh my gosh. Beautiful. Thank you guys so much. So, so we're just going to jump like right into it. How did you guys discern to space your pregnancies?
Yeah. So we actually, we did an episode on this because it's something that we think about a lot and talk about a lot. So for me, my first was a surprise. And then I kind of just felt ready pretty quickly for number 2. And she was also kind of a surprise. So those came like boom, boom, 19 months apart, not really very much discernment. And then when my second was 12 months old, I had another surprise that miscarried really early. So our third daughter was the first one that we like tried for. And so then I kind of had the experience of contrasting, like, so my second from 2 to 3 are 25 months apart. And those extra 6 months, like I felt the difference. So I was in better shape. Was able to like exercise through the pregnancy, and I had a great labor experience and postpartum experience. So that has kind of given me this perspective now on discerning spacing of like, I think when we were first married, we were like every month, like we got to be talking about this. Are we actively open or are we actively abstaining, and now I'm kind of like, okay, I've heard it said that like your body needs a year after birth to like get back nutritionally to where you were. That basically I'm like, yeah, I feel like I don't need to actively discern avoiding for that first year. It's kind of just like let's give it a year at least,
Yeah.
you know?
Well, yeah, it is so important for like our bodies to, heal. There is a lot that goes on in pregnancy. I am currently pregnant right now. You just had a baby. Like our bodies are going through or healing from a lot right now. And it's really important to take that into consideration. Like, you know, as Catholics, we aren't called to just have all the babies all the time. And like the second we start cycling again, we don't have to be like, okay, well, like now we have to have a kid, even though I started cycling at like 3 months postpartum. No, you can let your body heal. That is a very reasonable reason to do it. And in fact, in Humana Vitae, that is one of the things that Pope Paul VI actually specifically mentions is physical health. And so, yeah, it's just such an important thing to think about.
Yeah. And I feel like I'm lucky in that my husband is really on board with that too. You know, it's just like, he gets it. And then I feel like for me, I'm kind of like, I weaned the baby around 12 months. And then by 15 months, I started getting baby fever again. So then we're talking of like, okay, do we have like major life transitions coming up? Kind of like, how are we doing as a family? Looking ahead, how are we doing? And he is always quick to say, also, I will say, he's like, but babies are a blessing, you know, like we will accept a baby that comes. And I'm like, yes, I know. But like, is everyone sleeping through the night? Like, are we?
That's a good question.
Yeah. Are we healthy, you know, mind, body, and soul here? And kind of just, taking all those things into consideration. And now that I've had baby 4, I'm like, maybe like a 2.5 to 3 year space. Like, could we do that? Like, let's see.
Well, yeah, that's, I think one of the things I want to like touch back on that you said was like, you know, when you first got married, it was like every month we have to be talking about this every month. And, sometimes that gets said kind of in the NFP community of like, oh, well, the beauty of NFP is that like every month you have these deep conversations. That's not necessarily the case. Like there are, and I'm not even sure necessarily is the right like modifier there. Like that's really not the case in most situations. There are periods of time like what you were just talking about, Sarah, with like postpartum, where it's like you're really going to be in a more of a mental state for a longer period of time of abstaining. And yes, the conversation's always going to be on the table because of the openness to life that NFP requires, and has naturally built into its systems, basically. But it's like, maybe it's on the side of the table. Like it doesn't have to be discussed in this like deep, meaningful way every single month.
Yeah. Annie has a lot of good stuff to say about this, but I wish I had heard that when I was newly married, because it did feel like, you know, you should be having this conversation.
You have to make up for like the rest of the world.
My
OBGYN.
Such deep conversations. We're making up for all the people who aren't talking about it.
Exactly. My OBGYN, who is a Catholic doctor and NAPRO doctor. And when I asked him this, he said, average healthy woman, 2 years from birth to birth spacing. So I was like, okay, just like as like a one, you know, just like taking into account everything. And then I also asked him, when do you stop? And he was like, 43 is a good stopping point. I was like, all right. So, you know, like counting backwards. I know. I really put him on the spot too. He didn't want to give me numbers, but I do. It's good. It's nice to have some kind of understanding. My first 2 kids, or no, my first and my third, I have 3 kids. My first and my third were very much like, we're open, but it's not a likely night. So I wouldn't say they were as surprises as Sarah's, but they were still like, oh, I didn't think that would like totally happen, but it's cool.
Yeah, you were like kind of breaking the rules, but also like, probably not going to happen. And I was like, oh, look at that.
Super fun. Yeah. So Sarah and I both come from a background too of like super fertile, and like infertility is just not our specific cross. So we like recognize that. But anyway, I also love, this is like totally random, but I pulled up this quote that I just love from John Paul II, where he says, the choice whether to or not have more children must not be motivated by selfishness or carelessness.
Ooh, that's
I just
beautiful.
like can't even elaborate on that. It's so good.
I know it's like, yeah, there's nothing to say about that. Like just take that in, sit with it for a little while.
Yes. I love it. So I right now am not planning on any more babies right now for a long time. I don't know. That could be a year. It could be a few years.
But before you're 40.
Before you're 40. Yes, my husband, like a few weeks ago, he was like starting to get a little baby fever and talk about it. And it was like, I was like, what are you doing? We've had this, like, we don't have to have the big conversation every month. He was like, well, I just don't want to not talk about it. I was like, what's really happening? He was like, well, I just want you to have more kids before you're 40. I was like, I just turned 29.
I think I have time here.
He was like, oh, that's true. I have no sense of time. Good. It's like, cool. Awesome.
Oh my gosh.
I actually had baby fever for like 5 hours last week. And I told him that. And then I was like, the next day I was like over it. But because I feel like I have so much going on right now. My kids are 1.5 to 5.5. And after my third, I had a cervical ectropion, which I had after all of them. I had pelvic floor therapy. I had mastitis. I had like a really bad yeast infection. I was like, my vagina's broken. I'm broken. I just need some time. And like my husband's still like at the beginning of his career. So anyway, one big thing though, that, yeah, like Sarah mentioned, the sleep. I think that's like our number one question. Are all of my kids sleeping through the night? First, before I attempt this
question. Yeah. I'm really with you on that one. Oh my gosh.
Oh goodness. And I realized a lot when I had my third. My daughter, Claire, my oldest daughter, was just about to turn 4. And that was my moment of realizing her emotional needs and really started to become more apparent, because when you have just like little kids, they have a lot of just basic needs, and it takes a lot of time and, physical energy, but the mental energy that it takes to raise older kids is no joke. And like you have to start, teaching them how to, really cook and play board games. And, I was homeschooling Clara this year for preschool, and I had to be like really creative of how I engineered that time with the baby and my 3-year-old son, Paul. And as of now, my daughter's going into kindergarten, and Sarah's daughter, Evangeline, is going into first. And we're both like, yeah, they're going to Catholic school next year. Like, we can't do this anymore.
We can't do this homeschooling thing.
That's too much.
This is way too much.
Because and we know homeschool moms that do it, and like, great, and it's amazing. But for us, we have felt like, it kind of feels like we're either holding the big kids back or like rushing the little kids ahead. And there is no perfect timing for this, but there is a lot to consider when adding to your family. But none of these thoughts hit me until my daughter was like 4. It was just like, like sibling love, and I can take care of them. And, it's just a lot.
Well, yeah, it's really important to just like step back and take a look at your family as is when you're thinking about this discerning, when the next baby is going to come, because you might have like total baby fever, but maybe you have a 3-year-old with special needs, and you need to put a lot of your effort towards him or her. Like, or maybe you have a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old who like suddenly needs a lot more of your attention mentally, like, and you're having to put a lot more effort into kind of the relational aspects of that. And all of these things are really important to consider, and they are completely licit to consider. I feel like that's kind of one of the biggest points I want to get across in this episode, is that all of these considerations that we're talking about, these are questions to ask yourself. These are not selfish reasons to avoid pregnancies. These are truly reasons that you need to discuss. And it's going to be different for every family. That's across the board. Like all of these conversations are going to be different with every husband-wife situation, and every family situation and what kids you have. But don't be afraid to bring up all of these kinds of thoughts, even if it feels like, oh, this feels like a selfish reason. Well, bring it up, talk to your husband about it, talk to your wife about it, because maybe it's not, maybe there's something deeper that you need time to heal, or you need more energy for X, Y, or Z. I feel like I really jumped off on a tangent there. I'm going to give the mic back to you.
I love it. I could talk to your husband. Yeah. I think that's
just talk. Communication. That's key.
Yeah.
No, totally. I think people feel like, I think that's a very real thing of like, this isn't a good enough reason, but to just voice it out loud. Yeah. Have it there on the table. Because I think, even things like, oh, I want to lose the baby weight, or like, I want some months of feeling back to my normal self and being able to exercise, like something like that, which I definitely feel like, of course, if a baby comes before that time, it's going to be okay. Like it's going to work out. It'll be fine. But for mom to feel like, hey, I'm like a person, my needs are important.
Yes.
Is for me, at least, like, I'm going to be a better mom. I'm going to be able to enter the crazy zone of transition when the baby comes, like the chaos of like adding that person to our family. So much better if I like have a better, like, just feel more comfortable in my skin, in my body. And I'm like, yeah,
absolutely.
But yeah. God makes babies, and
but God also gave us a fertility cycle in which we can track. And, this isn't a mistake in his design that we have this cyclical nature of our fertility and infertility. So it's okay to space pregnancies. It's okay to want to space pregnancies. I'm just repeating myself again now.
I think though, on that, Ellen, a lot of people and that I've seen and know, they know that they have a cycle and that NFP is there for them, but they're never getting past the point of that, like post 3 to 6 month time of being done breastfeeding, that they never have a normal cycle. And then it's like babies are just kind of coming in every 18 to 24 months, whether they like plan on it or not. And it just kind of like feels. So I think there are a lot of women out there that don't buy this line that we have a cycle, because they're like, I don't. And I'm like, but you haven't like put in the time to get there.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also important to note that like ovulating is extremely healthy for women. And obviously when you're pregnant, you're not ovulating. You did at one point, obviously you had to once. But it is actually very, very healthy for us to have that cycle. And so, that's also just something to keep in mind health-wise, is like, it might be a good idea for you to have 3 or 4 or 6 or, whatever amount of cycles before you get pregnant again.
Yeah. For me, it's been really, really interesting and good to see Annie's journey with this. You should tell your story, Annie, because she's put in the work. Yeah. And has gotten back to normal cycles. And it's made me realize, oh, I haven't since I've had my first almost 6 years ago, because I haven't had 3 to 6 months post weaning. Like I've never gotten back into normal cycles. And so seeing her get there, and then like, well, we'll get into this too.
I wasn't trying to throw you under the bus though, Sarah.
No, I know.
Some moms. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Anyway,
I'm excited to talk about that, and I'm excited to talk about the sex stuff, because that's
get into the sex stuff.
That is another question that people feel really guilty about asking. So I'm really excited to get into, like how I got my cycle back and right on track, and about sex, because I think
sex stuff. Go for it, Annie.
Do it. Go there.
That should be like another good question that you talk to your husband about. After we had our daughter, and then now after we've had our third, we've taken a one night, like 24-hour away. I also try and do a yearly retreat. Sarah and her husband are really good at doing like getaways. But and
Awesome.
we don't want to Sarah says like compare and despair, which I think is great. But it is good to know sometimes what other people are doing, because there are some people who are like, going out for weekly dates, and some people who are like, I haven't been out with my husband in 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And
it's good to know what's going on. Like, what are other people doing? You get ideas, and those are good things.
Exactly. So
Thank you. Annie and I have been talking about sex kind of a lot in a good way.
Yeah.
In a good way.
Nothing's getting too freaky.
Yes. We're not sharing sordid details. But it has been inspiring to me to like, because I was like super pregnant, had a baby, postpartum. Sex is not forefront of my mind, but to kind of bring it to the forefront of my mind in a good way of like, sex is amazing. It's like an amazing gift. It's so unifying. And this is kind of what we were talking about more. It should be really pleasurable.
It should be. It really, really should be.
Yeah. But we started this conversation when I was super pregnant, and sex is kind of a struggle bus. And so Annie,
that's funny.
Yeah. Annie was like, I'm prioritizing my sex life. My cycles are so regular, so we can like plan these date nights and like really get into it. And I was like, must be nice.
You're like, I have a basketball or a watermelon inside of me. Like,
there's like clearly a third person in the bed with us.
Yeah.
Like, it's not.
You're having like, let's get labor started sex, which is very different.
Yes.
That's very different. That's a whole nother episode. We'll bring you guys back.
Yes. But it was, I'm appreciating that we've been talking about it, because it is nice to hear what someone else is doing, because it gives you this counterpoint of like, okay, I lost my train of thought there. Do you want to jump in, Annie?
Well, I can start by saying one crazy thing that I did and / learned after I had Cecilia, who's now like 19 months old, was my NFP. Sarah and I both used Creighton, and then we both secondarily use the LH strips to kind of confirm. She told me, the instructor, she was like, yeah, breastfeeding is a sacrifice. And like 3 to 6 months after you stop breastfeeding, your cycle is still wonky. And she didn't say it in a super preachy way, but to me, I was like, the message, that is amazing. And I was having all these struggles with breastfeeding, and it was a whole long story, but I did stop breastfeeding in part because I really wanted to get my cycle back. And I almost had preeclampsia with all 3 of my kids. I've had a miscarriage as well. And so the next one is going to be my 5th pregnancy, and twins run in my family. So like, that's a consideration.
That is, yeah.
Like, oh yeah. So it was like very dire to not have another baby anytime soon. And we were really ready to start, having regular sex again. And so I did wean. And for those 6 months, we only had sex during phase 3, which was also like a totally brand new concept to me. And I learned that like your most fertile time is right before you ovulate, not like during ovulation necessarily.
Yeah. Well, because the sperm need to be there. Like you're more fertile once, if the sperm are already there and then you ovulate, it's like, boom, easy peasy. There's a pregnancy.
Like new information. So we only used phase 3 for a long time. And that was really hard. There was like a lot of abstinence and, a lot of back and forth, a lot of meetings with our crane instructor. even though we know so much, it's still like you still need someone to look at your specific chart and figure out what's going on. And so I think that's why I've been so excited in sharing my news with Sarah, because I'm like, I'm here, I have arrived. You can do it too. You can have sex after your period and then have a short time where you're ovulating and go on dates and then sex again. So that's my story.
I love it. But yeah, I mean, it is truly a process for your body to get back to regular cycling after pregnancy. And if you've had, especially too, like I mean, this is probably not scientific, but like, I feel like it almost compounds on itself too. Like if you've had
it absolutely
3
does.
in a row, then like now it's going to take you even longer to like get back to a regular cycle because your body doesn't remember how to do it. I don't actually know. Don't take that as medical advice.
Well,
like,
that sounds right.
like it's yeah, it's good enough. All right. So I'm wondering, can we talk a little bit more about surprise pregnancies and just kind of like how you handled that and what it felt like and, you know, what it was like to kind of not be in the like, oh, I'm so ready for a baby right now phase. But
unsupportive family members.
Yeah.
That's all we'll say. We don't want to call anyone out. They were there though.
They know who they are now.
They know. Oh.
Yeah. I think when I was reflecting on this, I think I can look back and see that I was given like these moments of grace to accept the news before it came. Because I haven't yet had a like devastating surprise pregnancy, you know. I can imagine it pretty easily, but no, each time it's kind of been like just either I'm at adoration or, you know, I get some good alone time and I'm journaling and I just have this moment of like, like I am ready, like baby, that sounds okay. And then, but like, I'm totally not pregnant or think I'm not pregnant. And then, you know, like a week or two later, I realize I'm pregnant and it's, I can look back on that and be like, oh, thank you, God. Like, thank you for preparing me for that news. And my husband is kind of unflappable and just like takes things in stride. So he's been like the steady rock of like, yep, we're having a baby. It's going to be okay. We have 9 months. Though we did have a moment where I thought I was pregnant 2 months after my third was born. So it would have been like an Irish twin situation. And he did kind of freak out at that. He was like starting to look up, like buying a minivan. And he was just kind of like head started really spinning. And from that, I learned if I'm in any kind of doubt, just take the pregnancy test right away, because we had like a few days of this like weird anxiety. And finally I took a pregnancy test. I was like, no. Yeah.
Sarah has even taken a pregnancy test at my house.
Yeah. That is true friendship.
Do I think
right
I'm
there.
pregnant today? And then I told you, Sarah, when you were pregnant with John.
Yeah.
Before you took the test. Because you had kind of told me like, you know, of like when I think maybe. And then I don't remember what happened, but something you said, I was like, you know, you're pregnant, right?
Yeah. I was like, okay, I should just take that.
She's like talking to you about how sick she's feeling and tired. And it's like, you know, you're pregnant.
Like, I'm not even saying it like a question. You are.
Yeah. But I will also say, now that we've had the experience of kind of, sort of, you know, planning or trying, being like, we're open, and then like getting pregnant right away with number 3 and 4. Now my husband is very pro, like, can we time it with the academic year? Because the last 2 have been like perfect, where he ends his semester and then he's available for the summer and can help with the new baby. And it has been really nice.
Hey, that is another good consideration. Yeah. If one or both of you are like in school, it's not unreasonable to time a pregnancy for when you're actually going to be available to like care for a newborn who needs a lot of your like physical attention.
And I also was like, I do not want to be third trimester through DC summer. So that was a big motivating factor also.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. That's where I'm living right now is third trimester, in July and August. It's rough.
Yes.
It's
I'm
rough.
sorry.
But I'm not in DC. So I at least don't have the humid.
Yeah.
Just the California heat. Oh my gosh. I'm just gonna jump to the last question because I feel like we covered a lot of kind of some of the rest of the stuff we had in these other questions. So what are some important like questions for couples to discuss when discerning children and like spacing between children? We've talked about a lot of topics, but like specifically, what about some good questions to ask?
Well, I think asking, your husband, what's important to us? Like maybe your kid sleeping through the night is not important to you. Maybe you and your husband having a quickie twice a month is totally like your jam right now. That blows my mind because I'm like,
that wouldn't work for Annie, but
not if you're in like newborn phase, obviously, but if like life is just like pretty good. And that's, I think asking, your husband and having your husband ask you, like, are we satisfied, with our romantic life? Are we taking enough time with each other? Are you content? Are we finishing together during sex or both finishing? Sometimes that's even, I think about, Sarah and I are both converts, raised from really good Protestant families, but, I started my marriage off on birth control. And I remember like my bachelorette party being with good Protestant women wives getting just terrible advice about like sex toys and orgasms. That was like, so now that I think about it, it was like so wrong. So asking, each other, are you feeling loved? I think that's a really good question. And, do you feel like I love you body, soul, mind? And, what is the next like 5 years going to look like for our family? Because you're not just having a baby, you're having, you're adding a whole person to your family.
Right. It's not just like that first 6 months of like super baby stage. Like you're stuck with them until they go away.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
They're kind of around for a while.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. What other questions?
Well, things that you've brought up too, Annie, have been like, even just like your physical space. Like you are in a pretty small house right now. You've kind of maxed
no
out.
Space.
Yeah, you've maxed out this house. And like, yeah, where are we at career wise? Do we have some big moves coming up? I think those are, all these things are just like good to consider and weigh.
Probably like, what's your involvement with your family? Because neither Sarah or I have family living, in our neighborhood. My family's very, very far away, and Sarah's family's now like, far / a few hours. But, we don't have that type of support. And some people have grandparents living by and they suck. So think about that too. I know people with grandparents are nearby and it's like, they're not helpful and you assume they are and they're not. So that's another
such a good point.
Like, do we need and do we want, and is it actually going to be good? So
yeah. Community is big. Like, yeah. Do you have the friend support of like, will meals come and people to watch your older kids? And I think just kind of feeling like, do we feel solid as a family? Like, do we feel like, we can kind of, accept this.
The word
joyfully.
that's coming to my mind is like capacity. Like, do we have the physical capacity for this? Do we have the mental capacity for this? Like, I think it's just so important to think about these things. And it's so important to know, everyone who's listening, that like, it's okay to think about these things. I've like said this 3 times on this episode already. Like, but these are important questions to ask yourself. You don't just have, like, being quote open to life does not mean always being ready to have a baby at any time. You know, it's closer to like always being willing to, right? Like we're absolutely will accept a surprise pregnancy. That's not what we're talking about. But like, it is really, really okay to realize, hey, yeah, there's actually not space in this house for another human being. Like there just isn't.
Alex kind of thinks that we could. My husband kind of thinks that we could in our house, but I am a minimalist and our house is 935 square feet. And I'm like, and he's like already talking about bed configurations. Like, I don't know. Oh, one thing, if I can also add, I remembered a conversation that I had with a priest before I got pregnant with my first one. I was still in that really, really nervous point because, you know, we're trying to comfort people here if they, you know, have good questions and want to space out. And of course, there were, you know, going to accept children lovingly from the Lord, but also making room for Thanksgiving is what he taught me. Because I kind of gave him, it was, you know, kind of spiritual direction confession. I gave him my laundry list and he was like, I don't want your laundry list. What's your real problem? And I was like, fear. I am so scared. And my penance was the litany of Thanksgiving. And like Thanksgiving covers, fear and gives you, because, you know, I thought of that when you said capacity, because I'm super on board with you of, yes, we have to be mentally, physically, you know, capable and ready, but also like we are never ready, you know?
Right. And we're never at this point of like, oh, we are absolutely 100% ready for anything God throws at us. Don't say that.
And we're never enough, right? Like even if you felt I am totally capable and totally like have all the capacity, you still like, you know, you need to cooperate with God's grace because it's just so much.
But we have to rely on the Lord in everything in our life, like, and especially in raising children. But also like in our marriages, we need to rely on the Lord to like help us have the grace to have good, you know, marital relationship with our spouse. And so, we're never going to be 100% ready. We're never going to be enough. We're never truly going to have the full capacity, but there are times when we know absolutely that we aren't ready and we aren't enough and we absolutely don't have the capacity. And so it's important to bring those to the table and realize those times when you truly aren't ready. And it truly wouldn't be likely, it wouldn't be a good time to welcome another member to your family.
Yeah.
You said it. I'm 9 weeks postpartum and I'm like, man, I've got to buckle down and get back into charting.
Yeah, you got to get back into it now. You're like coming up close on 12 weeks.
Yeah.
Oh man. Well, good luck with that. I will be there soon. Oh man. Well, and actually I think when this episode airs, I actually likely will be closer to your situation. It's probably going to come out around the time that said baby currently inside of me will be outside of me. All right. Well, you guys, this has been awesome. Did you guys have anything else that you wanted to add in about discerning or baby spacing or some other hilarious quip? Because you have lots of those.
That is so much pressure.
End us with a laugh. Go.
No, seriously, that's too much pressure. We did it. That was sufficient.
That's all we have.
No, Sarah, seriously, do you have anything? Because I have nothing.
I probably was just going to say something of like, talk with a friend about your sex life.
That's really good. That's your marriage and where you're, ask them like, hey, how do you think my kids are doing with one another? Like, how do you think I'm relating to them, you know, as a mom and them as siblings? I think.
Okay, I got a quick question for you guys about talking to a friend about sex. Like, how did you start this conversation? Like who instigated this conversation and like, what did you like? Hey, Annie, I want to talk about sex with you.
That is a
like,
great question
like,
that I would
where did
love
this
to
come from?
answer.
So, well, we chat a lot on Marco Polo. And something that I think people who know me understand is I start conversations in the middle of a conversation. So I have no problem just like starting awkwardly. So I don't know, just like embrace the awkwardness.
Okay,
I guess you
go
could,
for it.
you could say like, hey, like, it seemed like, I don't know how to say it now, but like, we're having sex like twice a month. Does that seem like average to you? Like, what do you think? I don't know. You could go from there.
It's a good starter.
No, okay. I was going to say,
What do you go?
I get this text. This is how, in my mind, this is how the conversation started.
Do it. I probably remember.
I got this
wrong.
text from Annie. It's a link to a podcast called
No, we should not publicize it because we don't want to endorse it.
Okay, that's true.
It's a link to
It's a podcast about sex. Anyway, but she was like, this, I think, has gems. She was like, this is very secular and it's a lot, but there's gems in here for Catholic couples that I think like, everyone could benefit from. And so I was like, okay, I'm definitely listening to this now. Like, I'm very intrigued. It's so funny. But I think that's true. Annie said something about like, now we have 12 to 14 available days a month. And I was like, what? Like, I looked back at my charts because I was like, my memory is that we've never had that many available days. And I was looking back and I was like, yeah, we haven't. And then I realized it's because I've never gotten back to my normal, like regular cycles. I have so much continuous mucus and whatever.
Postpartum life.
But it just gave me this sense of like, what could be, and go for it. Like,
all right. So here's what I'm suggesting to those of you listening. So either embrace the awkward, just go for it with a friend and be like, hey, like, let's talk about this, or just send them a link to this episode.
Yes.
And then when they get to this point in the conversation, they'll realize, oh, wait a second. I think my friend
is trying to tell me something.
Talk with me about sex. So there's your options.
That's good. That's good, Ellen.
But if you're not ready to talk with that particular friend about sex, but you want to share this episode, maybe like precursor the share, like, just by the way, like, we don't have to talk about this if you don't want to.
I just want you to have it.
I just want you to have this episode because I think there's other good stuff, but like maybe not that part. Oh my gosh. Well, Annie and Sarah, it has been so fun to chat with you this evening. Thank you guys so much for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks so much for listening. If you want to connect with Annie and Sarah or listen to their podcast, links to their Instagram and their podcast are in the show notes. And then, of course, you can always reach out to me and ask any questions via Instagram or via email. Links to those are in the show notes. Until next time.